Okay, well, half of this didn't get recorded, but that's okay because if you showed up, you heard it. So now we're going to be recording the rest of it.
That's all
who
right.
has questions? Gina, you've got a question. You got your hand raised. Unmute yourself and ask your question.
Thanks. Tom, my question has to do with in the round where you're discussing going back. I assume it's like a second round thing where you're going back and asking for people's highest and best. Are you saying that as part of that strategy that you are doing this with all of the offers, or is it a legitimate and still in Poppy, be quiet. Is it still in keeping with your thought on that you can tell maybe the top 5 people that maybe not even tell them, but is it at any rate, are you talking about envisioning telling everyone that we haven't made a decision and we're giving you one more chance to do final and best, something like that? Or are you talking about giving it more or less to the finalists, the top few?
Yeah, fair question, Gina. Good thought. And I think it depends. So if you have 20 offers and you have 5 that are clustered, very, that are heads and shoulders above the rest, at your discretion, with your client's blessing, because really it's all about your client, right? So you're positioning yourself, you're giving them strategies, and then they're ultimately, arriving at what practice they want you to participate in. In that particular instance, if I had like 20 offers and there were 5 clustered, I would more than likely go with those 5 and work with those 5 and ask for highest and best. If there was a small amount of disparity between a lot of offers, I might utilize, and let's say we only have 4, and the disparity is fairly unpronounced, for lack of a better word, then I would probably utilize I would go back to all 4 of them. But yeah, if you have an investor that, is from somewhere and doesn't understand what's going on in the market and offers 175,000 on a $200,000 listing that you've got offers up to 250, that's probably not a real fruitful exercise. But it's really at your discretion and your client's discretion, and I think it's situational.
Well, thank you. Do you recommend I have recently won a bid where I saw my buyer's energy uptick when we were told that we were one of the top 2 offers. Do you recommend telling people what size of pool they're in if you use that strategy?
That's a great question, and one that's been posed, and I had to really kind of scratch my head. So here's my thing about disclosing amount of offers or somebody's significance of their offer relative to the offers you have. While I understand that it can give you some solace or your client some solace, I am not a huge proponent of sharing information because I think it's a slippery slope. And if you say to one person, hey, yeah, don't even write at 210 because I got 2 at 230 plus, your guy's never going to get it. And somehow those 2 offers at 230 fall out and you don't hold the one at 210, you've done your client a disservice. Now, I know people are say, well, Tom, that's a crazy scenario. That's nuts. You're an idiot. That will never happen. And it may not. But from the seller's perspective, if you go back and you ask for highest and best, you could go back and you could say, listen, if I'm asking you for highest and best, it means that we're considering your offer. Well, that's true. If you're asking for highest and best, that's not that statement has factual merit to it. But I think if you start getting into the slippery slope, unless your clients specifically instruct you, I think if you get into the slippery slope of divulging bits and pieces, you create, first of all, you create an incredible noose that could, from the stand, or, where you could get yourself into trouble because of fair housing. I mean, if it could be construed that you're sharing information about one offer and you're not providing that information to another one, and there's a protected class in there. We just had one where we had there was somebody who was in a protected class, and we didn't provide a counter. Our seller was lower, and they didn't provide a counter, and that particular couple was agitated buyer. We represented the listing, and their agent point blank inquired as to whether or not it was because of who they were, that they didn't get a counter. And of course that was not the case, not even close to the case. But it also begs the question if we're better off in many instances saying, oh, somebody says they lost all volume. Is anybody else lost all volume?
No,
I can hear you.
I can hear
Okay.
you. I think.
Okay. So at any rate,
might be on your computer.
it begs the question, should we be sending written rejections on each offer? And I know people are going to cringe, and they're gonna you know, just be put off by this, but I really don't think it's a bad idea. Now I know when there's 20 offers, it's tough, but I don't think it's a bad idea, because we certainly would never want, especially if we had dual agency. Can you imagine? We would never want there to be an inference that somehow we didn't present an offer. And what if we couldn't find the email? Or what if, God forbid, we had 30 of them and we didn't send one just because we missed it? I mean, I think it's best practice to get a written rejection in today's environment. And I know that sounds like a lot of work, and I know people would throw rotten apples at me if they could through the screen, but I'm just, from fair housing perspective, from a fairness perspective, because of the volume, I just think that at this point in time in our industry, more is actually more. Every bit of documentation that you can provide is wise, because you don't ever want somebody to suggest that you were biased or partial or not working into the benefit of your seller or your buyer. I mean, it's easy for people to get off the rails and to get in that mindset because of how difficult it is. So I don't know if that answered your question or not.
Great. We have a ton of questions coming in.
Okay.
Here, so
Okay. I'm going to answer them
move
quickly.
on to the next one, and because any one of these questions could be an entire ATA. So
Okay.
Let's go with Christy Bocheski. You've had your hand raised for a while.
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Hi, my friend Christy.
Hi.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
So I attended Code of Ethics class last week with Lisa Ritter as the instructor. And this whole crazy market where, like you said, it probably started a few years ago, where everybody said seller to review all offers on such and such date. Never even crossed my mind that, anything could be construed wrong with that. But she said that if we are holding offers for those 3 or 4 days and not showing them to the seller until that date that we said we were going to review, that we need to stop doing that because we're not presenting them in a reasonable time.
I agree with her. That's right. She's right. Okay. You have to present any and all offers as soon as practicable, which means that in the day of electronic offers and email, it's not prudent to say you're going to hold them for 72 hours and then present them all at once because you couldn't drive there. That's absolutely true. But that doesn't mean that you have to respond to them.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess if we're putting this verbiage in the MLS, it might be better to say seller to accept an offer on such and such date, not necessarily review.
It's a very fair point. Yeah. I would say seller, yes, seller shall accept an offer or plans to make a final evaluation with the expectation of accepting an offer. You could use the word final evaluation with the expectation of accepting an offer, because you don't want to say seller will accept an offer at 5 p.m. Well, what if it takes, till 6:30? So right. You got to be a little careful.
Give us that, whatever that verbiage is. Mm-hmm. I know you're kind of trying to give us something now, but if you could just.
Yeah, I'll write that down. That's easy.
Write that down, think about it, write it down, and then send it out to all of us because we all use it a lot. And different mixes. So
you know what? Kudos to Lisa Ritter. She's 100% right. that is a very astute observation.
Yeah.
And that language is loose and poorly construed and needs to be buttoned up, to her credit. I
Okay.
agree with everything she said.
I think
Okay.
one of the biggest things that I hear, and I'm sure you do too, is the agents get stuck on language, particularly right now,
Yeah.
because one word can put you in real estate jail. And
Yeah. it's
one
fair.
difference, and I think it's probably of anything that's most important in this market right now, is every single word has to have a meaning in that can be defended.
I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah.
I think it's
And
great.
if
Great
you-
question.
I
By the
love
way,
it.
Gina's question was fantastic and helped. Good for you, Gina. And Christie's that's fantastic. This is
Yeah,
great
these
stuff.
are great questions.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Patrick Favara, you're next. You're up.
Very good. Thank you. My question's not so much about multiple offers. It's about, but it is about pre-listing information. So I understand the rule, and I've seen some of the stuff that's been sent out on listing active, but holding showings off until a certain amount of time. I recently had a scenario where an agent did that on a listing. I won't even name who it was, but they did that on a listing, and then they canceled all listings because they said they took an offer before. When I inquired and I said, hey, I see you canceled the list or showings. Can you tell me what happened? And they said, we took an offer. And I said, well, was it sight unseen? And they said, yes. Another agent had inquired and they said they did a showing. And it turns out that they represented the buyer in that situation as well. So I'm wondering, what are the rules? Is that obviously against the rules? And how do we navigate that kind of backdoor way? Because I thought that, it's almost like a backdoor coming soon, which was a thought eliminated by previous rule changes. So what are the ground rules there, and how do I navigate those, or do I just accept that as a possibility?
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful set of scenarios that you've created, that you've suggested there. And it doesn't surprise me because Patrick's a smart guy. But here's the deal. This is what we had. I'll give you a quick one. So we had an agent call me, one of our agents, and he said, listen, I got this thing as a coming soon. I did not set up any showings. I did not set up a showing, Tom. I just need you to know that. The buyer, unrepresented buyer, knocked on my seller's door, muscled their way into the house, looked at everything, said, yep, this is it. Called me and said, hey, I want to write an offer. You got to write an offer for me on this house. Now, what the hell do you do with that? Right? So the problem is that we have two conflicting governing entities here. This is going to be the moral of the story. You have the real estate commission. It says that you have to do certain things from the standpoint of being a fiduciary to your client. Okay. And then you have the Omaha area, well, now the Great Plains Regional MLS, and that's the governing body in essence, that was the Omaha Area Board of Realtors, that is mandated by the National Association of Realtors. So many of the rules and regulations are administered by NAR, and then they're facilitated at the local level by these local entities. At the end of the day, NAR can't take your real estate license. The real estate commission can. So nobody really talks about these dirty little secrets because they don't want to get themselves wrangled into a battle with NAR or the MLS or local MLS and what have you. All good people, by the way, have respect for them, like them, all good people. But at the end of the day, Greg Lemon holds more clout and the state of Nebraska holds more clout than the MLS. So in that instance, what I said was, I told my client, did you inform your seller? Yeah. Does the seller want to see the offer? Yeah. And I said, then you write the offer. Because at the end of the day, our fiduciary obligation to the seller trumps, in my estimation, and this is a judgment call, but you ask the question, I'm going to give you a straight answer. In my opinion, our obligation, fiduciary obligation otherwise, and following the guidelines and the laws of the state of Nebraska supersedes the MLS. Now, they try very hard for those two to not conflict, but it's not perfect. And they do from time to time conflict. But I think that we try to work within the spirit of the MLS guidelines. But at the end of the day, we err on the side of respecting our clients and following the law, which ultimately requires us to meet our fiduciary obligation. I don't know if that's a good answer, but that's my answer.
Does that help?
Yeah, it's fair. Thank you, Tom.
In our chat, Maya has asked, I've submitted several offers this week, smiley face, but on my last offer, the agent, that would have been like a upside down one for me. The agent received 27 offers and had over 60 showings in 1.5 days. So impressed that this agent took the time to call me, not text me to thank me for the offer and tell me that we didn't receive the offer. So some kudos to agents who are actually doing that. And as you said, Tom, like responding, I know I've made 25 phone calls to the people who lost, and they're not the easiest phone calls, but I'll tell you what, that your advice there is absolutely fantastic of making sure we do that. So do you have anything to add to that?
Well, the shoe goes on the other foot, folks. I mean, we're all going to be on the other side of that equation, and we certainly don't want to dissuade that particular buyer's agent from offering on our next listing. And all that being said, it's common courtesy. We're Midwesterners. We're good people. We have high expectations of ourselves and good values, and we should, as a company, we should always err on the side of being courteous and responsive and generous in our actions. It doesn't cost anything to do that. If anything, it buoys your business and makes you a more well-respected professional. So those 20 minutes that you think you don't have, carve them out. It's in your best interest, your client's best interest.
Lola!
Whoa. Lola.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry.
We needed some levity. That was too serious.
And Maya alluded to that and said, I'll remember that and thinking of changing how I communicate that. We're all getting beat up as buyer's agents. Yeah, we really do need to take care of each other right now.
Absolutely.
Another question from Kathy Shunk. Do you have a feel for how many accepted offers are cash paid on behalf of buyers by parents, grandparents, and the buyers will use a loan to buy it back from them in order to get the offer accepted? We're in the middle of just doing that with somebody right now. So
it's happening a lot.
Yeah.
Because think about it, where are all these cash offers coming from? These kids that are 28 years old, they don't have 250 grand. Very, very few of their own money. Very few. It is an extremely prevalent strategy all across the country now. And we're hearing it in all sorts of markets. And there's all sorts of estate planning that's going on through using real estate as a vehicle. And it's a very, very good strategy and can have positive, I don't want to speak generically, but in certain circumstances can be a very positive, have positive tax implications potentially for, somebody who's trying to divest some of their assets and what have you. So first of all, I'm glad you brought it up, Kathy. It's a great point. And to offer it out, not everybody has a rich grandma. I wish I had one. Anybody who wants to adopt me as the rich grandma, I'm taking applications. But I just think at the end of the day, it's an incredibly strong strategy. It is being utilized. And I know it maybe seems in bad taste or too forward to suggest it. But if you got somebody that you know is just not going to win and they just haven't thought about it and you think they might have resources, I would have thought 3 years ago it was in poor taste. I think today it's a strategy that I would implement. I wouldn't say, hey, do you have a rich grandma? But I might say, does somebody in your family have resources where we could simply get the deal done and it wouldn't be to their financial detriment, maybe to their financial benefit, and we could refinance and that could afford you the opportunity to maybe pay less on the house, maybe less than closing twice. Is that something that you could consider? Now, the lion's share of the people are going to say no, because not everybody, like I said, has a rich grandma, but or uncle or whatever, but some do, and they probably haven't even thought of that avenue. So I think it's something we should consider.
Something that a lender shared with me that she's seeing on purchase agreements is having the conventional financing with a backup, and there's something they call it something. So if this does not serve to close, then it's backed up by
Cash.
funds, and they send a copy of the proof of funds. So
Yeah.
if this, then that.
Yeah, no, and I think it's okay to do that as long as it's done up front and people don't try
Yeah.
to bait and switch from cash to financing.
Right.
Kathy commented again, how many do we think though? Because that went unmentioned. How many under the 200,000 price range? I can't give you a refined, finite, statistically accurate, verified number, but I will tell you between first-time home buyers being helped by parents and grandparents and between cash buyers that are lines of credit and or cash from investors, it's a ton. I mean, 200,000, lots of them. It's taken lots of them are taken. I don't know, and I would love to hear everybody's thought, but I'll bet you it could be as high as 50%. And that might be aggressive. I'd love to hear somebody's thought on that. Anybody who has an opinion on that that's been battling it with $200,000 buyers, but it's way more than it has ever been by far.
Go ahead
Right.
and unmute yourself if you have a comment there. I know for us, and because I just did these numbers, 40% of the buyers that we have this kind of backup
Okay.
right now with cash.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that it is very prevalent and it's hard to win because you got to remember, not to be negative, but it's just the truth. Only has to have one of them. If everything else is the same and one's cash, it only takes one out of the 6 of them, right? So you only have to get beat by one. That's the thing that stinks about it. You could have 3 of them, doesn't matter. There just has to be one. So it's tough, guys. I mean, cash is king. It always has been and it always will be. And there's just no way of getting around it. Now, I do want just briefly, somebody said to me, well, they can switch we had one that wanted to switch from cash to or from conventional to cash. It was a deal. And they said, well, you got to accept that. I said, well, no, we don't. We don't have to accept that because it's a material term until you've demonstrated that you have the cash. You have to demonstrate that you actually physically, that you have the cash. It's a change in terms and it's material to the contract. So you can't just say, oh, we're cash. You have to be able to demonstrate that, and there needs to be an addendum to the contract. If the terms of payment, for lack of a better word, was not material to the contract, then why is it in there? So my position is, if something is fundamentally relevant and placed in the contract, then it's materiality. A change in those terms has materiality and has to be addressed in some magnitude within an addendum. Because otherwise, why is it in there? If 20% down, why is that paragraph in the contract? If there isn't materiality to that from the standpoint of breach of contract, then why is it in there? And I think that's the argument. Now, if we didn't have a financing section in the contract and it wasn't stipulated in some other capacity, like with an addendum or other verbiage, then I would say that you could do anything you want from the standpoint of making the payment. But the fact that it's stipulated in the contract creates, in my opinion, through advice from counsel and others, a materiality that needs to be considered. So you can't just say, hey, we're cash and switch to financing and think it's okay. It's just not.
Hey, Tom, would you speak to, we don't have a whole lot of time left. And one of the things that I know is a big topic of conversation is, would you speak to your strategy around pricing in your offers? If you say that the market is, the price is up 13%, is that a figure that you use? Do you use your CMA? Because that whole thing, it's a crapshoot as far as I'm
pricing thinking. For a listing?
Yeah, no, not for a listing.
Okay.
Well, both actually, but I'm talking about in a multiple offer. What kind of strategy are you using?
To extrapolate, kind of looking about whether somebody could be underwater.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Well, where
down the
do
road.
where do you price it? Because you can't, you can't use the strategy of pricing where the appraisal will come in, because that's a whole nother piece of the negotiation.
Mhm.
Where are you pricing? How bad somebody wants it? Do you have a percentage in mind? What's your
Well, I
process?
think yeah, that's a great question. The most important, first thing I always ask a buyer is how long do you plan on being here?
Mhm.
And I will tell you, if they're planning on being here for less than 2 years in today's market, short of
Yeah.
buying something that's really rough that they could flip right away and be okay on. If you're buying a cream puff, the best of the best, and you're having to pay a incredible premium, and you're planning on being somewhere for less than 3 years today, I think it's irresponsible to encourage somebody to buy that. That's my personal opinion. Certainly they have they can do anything they want. They have the, capacity to do anything they want. That's the first thing. Second thing is you do have to explain to them that it's a forward-looking market. So it's, while we're not 10% month on month, obviously those numbers are in comparison to the previous year, that things do not appear to be going down. Like the average price right now in the MLS for a pending transaction is $323,000. Now, if you would have told me that the average house is going to be $323,000. Now, I'm telling you, I can remember, and it feels like yesterday, it was 140.
Yeah.
And it was a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago. So I think that if people are going to hold houses for 5+ years, I'm less inclined to be too concerned about overpaying, although it's always a consideration. If their economic situation is volatile, if they could get transferred, if they feel like they could lose their job at a whim, it's our responsibility to talk with them about that exposure, not to make the decision for them, but to speak to it. As a percentage, I think you got to look at it and you got to say, hey, what do you think that this thing could top out at, in the sense of if things flattened and they went down a little for a couple of years and then they went back up a little, not every situation is created equal. But if somebody bought a house for 280,000 last year and they didn't put a dime into it, is it worth 310 the same day this year? Absolutely, it is. 100%. Is it worth 335? Probably not. Is it worth it to pay 335? Well, okay. How long are you going to hold it? What are you paying in rent? All these things. And I hate to give a hedge, but you've got to look at it from all the considerations. You got to ask about abundance of questions to these folks so you can navigate through their exposure and what their end goal is. Is it an investment? I will tell you, I will never sell my personal residence for what I have in it. I don't particularly care because I don't plan on selling it anytime soon, and I'm enjoying it. So we have to ask people, is it more important that this particular property hold value, or is it more important that you get what you want to facilitate your lifestyle? And usually the answer is somewhere in between, but it's a series of questions that you have to ask your buyer to effectuate the right path forward for them, that they ultimately decide. You can't wave a broad wand on that. That's my opinion on it. Carol, I'll go longer if people want to go longer.
Sure. Let's stay on. Anybody next questions? Dawn had commented back on that other one that she had just accepted an offer, just accepted one like that on her listing. And that was the one with one kind of financing that switched to cash if it didn't hold. So Katie Day, so how do you handle buyers that think prices will go down if they wait a bit? I don't foresee home prices decreasing in the near future. Do you? I think you just kind of spoke to that, but.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great thought, Katie. And I know Aubrey's got some, she's got her hand waved, so we should get her now. But I'll answer this real quick. I think you're right, Katie. Do I think in the next 6 months that prices are going to go in? I mean, how can they? There's 1,238 houses. I mean, short of interest rates going up 2% overnight, here's the facts. There's 1,238 active houses in the entire MLS, and that includes Lincoln. Okay. There's 4,250 pending houses. Now we've got nearly four times as many pending houses as we have active houses. How the hell are those prices going to go down in the near term? I mean, the math on that is pretty difficult to swallow. Now, if interest rates went crazy, if there was a terrorist attack, if this pandemic spiraled and we had a strain that was deadly and it was a big deal and what have you. I mean, I know these are all awful things to say, but I'm just saying if something like that happened, then yes. But now if somebody said to me, hey, in 2 years, could things look different? I think that's, nobody has a crystal ball. But do I think prices are going to go down demonstrably in the foreseeable near term? I'll call it 18 months. I personally do not. But the last time I checked, I didn't have a PhD from Harvard in economics. So you'll take that with a grain of salt. That and $1 will get you a cup of coffee at McDonald's.
Okay, Aubrey, you're on. Unmute yourself. There you go.
Hey guys, so I was talking to Eric Almquist the other day, and he always does a really good job of educating himself, listening to other experts in the area. And he listened to a mortgage guru who predicts that nothing will change, no bubble will be bursting for at least a couple of years. And the reason he gave was very interesting. So I know for a while we were told millennials would never buy a home. They like the freedom of being able to go where they want to go with their gen. Millennial is a part of 1 in every 3 transactions that we have. Eric had mentioned that the average age of a first-time home is 33 years old. And if you look at the bell curve of when the most millennials, which is the largest buying group that we've had since the boomers, there, if you look at the curve, we're at the very bottom of the beginning. So we're still a couple of years before that group will have the most 33-year-olds, which is the average age of a first-time home buyer, that exist. So we're, to your point, Tom, it was just interesting to have a little bit of information backing that up too, that we're here for quite a while. And on another note, if you
That's
guys—
brilliant, by the way. Aubrey, thanks for sharing that data.
Sure.
Brilliant and much more adept and succinct and concrete than anything I said. So that's amazing information. Thank you.
And if any of you guys are ever up against Billy Coburn for writing an offer on a house, good luck. That guy is amazing. He was very smart in an offer he wrote, and did all the stuff where we write pay for the seller's closing costs, make up the difference in appraisal, all of that. He, in addition to his pre-approval letter, submitted a proof of funds letter, which I have not done, showing that my client can pay the seller's closing costs, can make up the difference in the appraisal in addition to their down payment and closing costs. And that was a total duh moment for me. And that's what made the difference for my sellers. So he won.
So God, Aubrey, thank you. That is so good. And it's one thing I wanted to say with that. If you are, God, so glad you said that because I missed something fundamental. If you say, for example, seller or purchaser to cover, let's say it's the list price is $250. Let's say the sale price is $275. And the purchaser says, we'll cover the difference from the list price to the $25,000, right? So we'll cover the $25,000. We need to be verifying funds for their down payment, their closing costs, and the $25,000 to make that whole. Mm-hmm. Because we've had 3 of them this week where guess what they didn't do? They get the appraisal back. It's short 16 grand. They don't have it. Yeah. So to your point, Aubrey, that is so important, and we should be requiring of, we only require pre-approval letters. We never require funds to close. Why not? There's no rule against it. Why can't we ask for the money if it's cash? Why do we just rely on the lending institution? They're printing these pre-approval letters pretty quickly. I'm not picking on lenders, but you brought up a couple great points. So thanks, Aubrey, for that. But be thinking about cash to close on the unforeseen circumstances too.
Tom, I also think that a pre-qualified letter is so much stronger than a pre-approval letter. So I've been working with my buyers to get a lender that will do a pre-qual letter saying that all of the requirements have been met except the appraisal.
Yeah, very, very good point, Trudy. I'm glad you said that because you're right. Not all lenders' letters are created equal. it's important to remember what outstanding items, because to Trudy's point, the point she's alluding to, that she very astutely said, is that you could go in, they could run your credit score and you could throw some pay stubs down and they could say you're good. Well, they may not have affirmed that they have the cash to close, or they may have only ran the credit, or they may have an independent contractor and saw, last year's numbers and don't have the first quarter. I mean, there's a myriad of things that could present themselves. So thank you for chiming in, Trudy. That's why I love these things, because I know this little bit and you guys know this much. And when we bring it all together, we get so much good. Thanks.
We got a response. We did a cash offer last week that was accepted with, they required, so it was contingent on a home that was closing in California. They required a copy of the full purchase agreement and the addendums, removing every contingency, plus the seller's, who was our buyer, the seller's closing statement with a copy of the mortgage balance, because they wanted to see exactly how much money they owed on their house compared to what they were getting to make sure. I mean, it was.
And that's, you know what, Carol, and let's think about this. We have 22 offers on a house and we get to choose one. We can't sell the house 22 times. We get to sell it once.
Mm-hmm.
That seems, because culturally it seems like overkill. How dare we don't do all of that for our seller?
Yeah. So
how dare we don't stack the deck and do the extra work? They're paying us a lot of money for this, our services. We have to do better. These are different times. We have to elevate our game. That is the appropriate, and you can do that. You can do that respectfully. You just send an email. This is what we need. Boom, boom, boom. And if they want to get their offer accepted, they'll do, and you can do it politely. It doesn't have to be, you have to do this. You can say it politely and you can get them to do it. So, all right.
I think the goal has to be in your mind as a buyer's agent is complete risk mitigation for the seller. So there's absolutely not one question left when your offer goes over there to the seller's agent. There's not one question left of how propped up your buyer is.
If you have 15 to choose from, why wouldn't you have as sure a deal as you could have? Short of that buyer keeling over before they get to the closing table, which we can't control that. Yeah. There should be very little rocks unturned. That's just good business. And we owe it to our sellers. We owe it to them, because think about it. They could lose a lot of money in this process. Having a great listing agent is never of more consequence today than it has ever been. Contrary to all the ideas about you could just put a sign in the yard and sell a house, getting the best conclusion for a seller has never been more critical in the Omaha real estate market since I've been involved in it than it is today. It is at the utmost importance.
Tom Becca has a question, and then we're going to rally this up if you feel like you need to, or if you had time, Tom, that's fine. Anybody who wants to stay on can. About to place an offer on a house at $430,000. She's going to pay cash with a bridge loan. Do I need to mention that, or do I write the offer up as cash? Good question.
So it's a great question. So long as you have the ability, you can get a letter from the lending institution saying that they have those funds available. Then you need to rely on the lending institution to write it. So you're not relying on your perception of what it is. Have the lending institution write the proof of funds letter. Now, if they ask for additional information, like, hey, I want to see it in a checking account, then you can either comply with that by having them tap that line of credit or not. But you need to make 100% assurance that it's going to be executable from the standpoint of having the money available. Because if you have any reason to believe that money's not going to be available, like if the line of credit is conditional on them getting a certain appraisal on that house or anything of that nature, if there's uncertainty with that, there is materiality in what you're presenting. So we have to, as buyer's agents, if there's, for example, if somebody's in the midst of a divorce or something and they won't be able to purchase, or if they actually don't have the funds, or if there's something that's being conveyed from the standpoint of not being 100% truthful about the buyer's ability to perform, we violated Nebraska statute and license law. So it's okay if you know the money, but it's best practice is to say, hey, get your line of credit established, get your HELOC on your house, have the ability to fund it immediately. Actually funding it would be the best, and having the cash sitting in an account is the best. If they don't want to endure any sort of interest expense because it's a longer period or what have you, at a minimum, it should be an irrevocable letter of a line of credit for a period of time so that they can execute on the transaction. We have to be very sensitive to representing it honestly, but we also have to advocate for our clients. So what I would do, Tom, in that instance, is I would ask the lending institution to suggest what they're comfortable with from standpoint of suggesting that they have the funds adequate to close. And then I would try to make all assurances that you are, in a responsible way, comfortable that that's going to occur. That's the advice I would give you.
Great. All right. Gina, we'll give you the last question here. Gina has her hand raised, so
Great.
go ahead, Gina.
I know the statement, there's no dumb question, but having said that, I feel like I'm about to ask a dumb question,
No, you're not.
which is, when we're writing these every day, these things about covering sellers' closing costs, can that go toward the professional agent fees on the seller side?
It's a great question. There's nothing dumb about it. The answer is yes, legally. The second answer is you got to make sure that the lending institution will allow for it. Some lending institutions won't allow you to pay sellers' costs, primarily commissions. So you just have to make sure before you're writing it that you're communicating with your buyer's agent, or excuse me, your buyer's lender, just to make sure that there's no nuance in that. And I think it depends on the loan product in certain instances. And I'm probably not as well versed in this particular topic as I should be, Gina. So I'm going to check into it a little bit more, but I have heard where we couldn't do it. There was a circumstance where it didn't work. And I've seen it where it has worked. So
Okay.
does Patrick have one more thing?
Patrick has one more thing, but one thing I want to add to that, Tom, and maybe ask you this question, is I saw on an offer, it was not towards sellers' closing costs, it was towards sellers' moving relocation costs.
That might be a distinction that will pass mustard. I don't know. I think the problem is that we're chartering such new waters, and every underwriter, here's what I would say. Make sure that it's been in the underwriter's hands. Make sure that the underwriter, I know we kind of like to play in the shadows a bit because it's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. We're just not in a forgiveness day and age. You just got to make sure that's going to work.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you're screwing up a bunch of people's lives and maybe opening yourself up to liability and potential litigation. So I just think the answer is get it figured out beforehand. Talk to the lender.
Patrick, last question. This is it.
Well, this might be a waste of time. I think Tom just answered it, but if we're going to do those types of things, offering to pay closing costs, or God forbid, their moving costs, separate addendum, is that still a reasonable thing to do, just to maybe avoid, if the lenders don't ask for it, don't give them that? Is that still reasonable to do?
Well, of course, I would never encourage anybody to not provide information that's material to a contract to somebody who has a vested interest in that contract. Of course, that I would never encourage somebody to do that. That said, if they have the cash to pay for something, and I would do it because, of course, if they don't have the cash, then it's got to be done, in the deal, right? Because they've got to get it financed. If they have the cash, I would find something of value in the house that we could utilize a bill of sale for, and I would do it that way.
Gotcha.
I'll pay you $5,000 for your lamp in the living room, kind of thing.
Got it. Yeah.
I would never say that, Carol.
No.
You said it.
Okay, with tongue in cheek. All right. Anything to wrap this up? Otherwise, Tom, you want to give us a final wrap? obviously we could do this like every week for weeks and weeks and weeks. I don't think we'll ever run out of questions, and all these questions will probably be the same questions asked a different way a week from now. So,
No, I
so
just,
thank you.
yeah, no, I just want to thank Carol, you for facilitating this and giving me the opportunity. And I also want to thank all the participants. And the questions were fantastic, and the comments. So they weren't just questions. A lot of them were comments with a question. I mean, I don't know how many people we had, but 8 or 10 people. I mean, this is our secret sauce, guys. This is what makes it special. So just please keep coming and doing these things. And if anybody has something that and Gina, thank you to Gina Stearns, because a lot of the impetus of some of these items were based on a conversation that her and I have had, kind of an ongoing dialogue. So anything that you think is pressing, understand that I don't always know what's holding you up. So constant dialogue. Let's do more of them. We can do them in ATAs. We can have just meetings where we talk about it. It's all good.
There were 41, 42 people on,
Yeah,
and
that's
2
great.
people had to leave at 1, but we still have 33. You held them. You held them.
They could do better, but they're smart enough to know that somebody else is going to say something smart, and they don't want to miss that. So that's wonderful. Thank you to everyone. Looking forward to seeing the Gold Coast people on Friday, right? And then we got these broker breakfast deals. So love seeing your faces. Can't wait to see everybody else soon.
Next week is Ethan and Ryan Renner talking about making your time work for you with online leads. So
Love it.
please join us. We'll send you
And talk about 2 guys that are between the 2 of them, they probably have 50 or 60 million in annual volume through that conduit in one way or another. Whether team members
magic. So
yeah,
join us next week. And then the end of the month, April 29th, is Greg Mitchell. So get ready.
And that was thanks to that was really thanks to Julie Erickson. Great suggestion, right? So yeah. So thanks to Julie if she's out there somewhere, because she's a great one too.
Yeah,
thanks so much.
May is new construction. See you guys then. Bye.
Bye, Carol. Thank you. Great job.
Bye.
Talk soon.
Thanks, Tom.